So let's start by removing our overflow or coolant reservoir, whatever you want to call this. There's two 10mm bolts holding it on. I've already taken those off earlier when I put this new alternator on. If you have any trouble getting any of these hoses off, ouch. If you have any trouble getting any of these hoses off, all you do is just take some pliers and just twist it like that some. That'll break the seal. These came off really super easy. This whole thing right here is trash. You'll also need to take off the hose that goes on the bottom. Which I know I enjoyed putting that on there. I replaced this tank about 3 or 4 years ago. They make tools that make this way easier. But, you know, I'm just a backyard mechanic and I just do with what I got. The air conditioner line wasn't in my way, I'd already have this off. Make sure to have a drip pan under you because you're going to be losing water. I'll just take this bottom hose off. Which I thought I got it, guys. I didn't get that clamp all the way off. Now, if you plan on reusing this tank, you're definitely going to want to be a bit careful not to break the plastic or anything. I got a brand new one, so this one's going in the trash. Just puking out water and oil. It's coming. Ah. About ripped. Okay, so next let's go ahead and disconnect the cables for the alternator. And typically on these, that's a 10mm. This here is one of the reasons you're going to want to unhook your battery so that you don't short this out like I did when I was installing the alternator. Also make sure not to lose your retaining nut. That's just to leave that sucker back on the alternator. That way there's no question about what it came off of. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is take the serpentine belt off. It's much easier without the tank in the way. You could leave the tank on there if you needed to. To do this, okay, so you turn the nut on the idler pulley clockwise to release the tension on the pulley. See most people using 2 box 10 wrenches joined together to do that, whatever you need to do to get it off of there. Then the next thing that you're going to need to do is get your alternator bolts out. That one's a 15 millimeter. This one's a 13 millimeter. Yeah, so you'll need a 15 millimeter and a 13 millimeter socket. Actually, you just need to move this into the bracket, just the 2 15 millimeter bolts. Wait a second, you need to get the other. Okay, well this one I can't get my most favorite tool on. I'm going to actually have to man up and use a wrench. Gotta find out what size. 13. You don't have to worry about this nut here. It's got a clip that keeps it from coming off or any of that, or loosening up, or spinning the bolt while you're tightening it, or any of that. So that makes that pretty neat. And I'll make sure and keep all that garb together. Oh, I didn't realize that. Get this bracket off. There's some more bolts down through here. Yeah, they're 13 millimeter as well. Slick, wasn't it? So now you should be able to get your alternator out. You may need to use a pry bar or something to pry it out with, but this one just came out easy because it's brand new. Now's an awesome time to check your belt wear and all that good stuff, because you know it's a severe pain to have to put it back on there. motor mounts cracked and busted on this thing. There's one more bolt on down there towards the bottom that holds this motor mount bracket on. Well, actually there's a nut on a stud that you have to take off here at the bottom, not a bolt. Pulley off right here. Thing has to be ridiculous. Yeah, I didn't know him to put that in there and get that. There we go. That made that much easier. You can go ahead and remove your serpentine belt and get that out of your way. Okay, let's get the bolts out of this bracket here that hold the power steering pump and alternator on. 15 millimeter. And I think you also have to get the bolt that holds the serpentine belt tensioner on there. And it looks like somebody replaced the bolt with something else, because I read it's supposed to be a Taurus 50. But let me go get me a different socket. Okay, there's another 15 millimeter bolt underneath that you'll need to also get to. And there, as you can see, the camera moves, so did the bracket there. So let's get all that out of the way. Well guys, so far that's what has came out of the coolant system when I unhooked the hose from that reservoir tank. No, that's not diarrhea floating around in antifreeze. Because that's exactly what it looks like. It looks like somebody pissed right out of their anus into that, but I assure you that's motor oil. Yuck. We're gonna do now is disconnect the power steering pump. So I have it ready to catch that. Vice grips can get in there to it, not a chance. But what we do need the vice grips for is the unpressurized line. Everything is in the way for this. comes my walk with our family. So I'm probably about to get sidetracked from what I'm working on. Oh, you know what? I can just about get that one by hand. Just about, but I can't push down. I was able to, well, there we go. Hello.
How's it going?
I had a tough time getting this hose off. There it goes. Guess because you walked over here.
I'll help you. I would like to help you.
Oh man, it's bleeding everywhere. Should I find? No, it's going in the drip pan. Nut here to get the power steering pressure line off is an 18 millimeter. And just trying to be a little stubborn with me. Air conditioner line is such a pain. So now this bracket can be completely removed. Get that top one to move, not that bottom one. However, if I can get the top one out, then I can probably get this bracket off. So here I got these studs here out of the head that hold that bracket on by just taking my vice grips and grabbing a hold of the smooth part, not the threaded part, and just, you know, twisting it out. Hope they come out that easy for you. So anyway, you're going to need some, I'm pretty sure that's an 8mm right there. You're going to need an 8mm and a 13mm to take off the water pump. And before we get to that, let's go ahead and take off the water pump pulley. Hold that on, or a 13mm. The easiest way to do this is to take 2 boxed in wrenches, get a hold on one, and use the other one. Use one to hold one of the bolts down, the other to loosen it.
And then eventually you can pull it.
Yeah. Just gotta get this pulley off so you can get the water pump off.
What you have to take your water pump off for?
Get the front cover off. Plus we're putting a new water pump on it too.
I bet the wrenches would be too hard for me.
Yeah. You wouldn't be able to get down in here to use them, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I think it says engine oil.
That's exactly what that says. Good job.
It's hard because it's upside down.
She's got it though. Did he?
I think. I guess that's an old one, though.
So that's a bird that she says Jigger's killed. Now, these bolts on the pulley shouldn't be on there that tight, and if they are, I'm sorry for you. But they're always just supposed to be just barely tight on there, so it shouldn't be a difficult thing to pull on off of there. And once you got that off, you want to make sure and disconnect the hoses. You got another hose right there that needs to be disconnected. And that's your lower radiator hose.
Doesn't look like the old one.
What?
That bird.
Oh.
I wish we had those rags.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine if you burned rags for oil.
You can't. Hose clamp's trying to fight with me.
Like I'm not one. I'm just
those off too. Alright, so we've got all those bolts out now. It's probably also a good idea to unhook your crank position sensor connector too, so that you don't break that or hurt it. Make sure before you just start going crazy on the thing that you removed all the bolts. And just come right on off of there. That didn't look nearly as bad as I imagined it would, considering it's been pumping around old tainted water. So now we'll work on getting the front cover off here, and what we're going to wind up needing to do next is get the harmonic balancer or engine crank pulley, whichever you want to call that. We'll need to get that off. In order to do that, we'll need to remove the right front tire and go get a tool to pull that off with. Because when you took all the bolts out for the water pump, that took care of the top cover bolts. Okay, so I got the right front tire and the wheel well off. Next we need to get the bolts out of the harmonic balancer and the crank pulley. These are 13mm bolts. There's 4 of them. And then also we've got here a 13/16 socket, maybe a 21mm. Extension went. Okay, get the pulley off. Now we need to get the damper off. First thing you want to do is insert the center bolt that you're going to use to actually pull it off with. Make sure to get the tip put on there first. Then you'll just put the bolts in whatever pattern you can get them in. Center the tool with the tip before you tighten those down. You don't want to pull it lopsided or any of that. You don't have to worry about tightening down like crazy or any of that. And it's a 19mm bolt head on this tool anyway, and depending on which one you have or rent, it'll be different. So it says not to use an impact wrench, but I do it anyway. So next you want to take these two 8mm bolts that bolt the oil pan to the front cover, the tire cover. And you can change this without changing the oil pan gasket, but I'm likely to do that too. I'm not sure yet, make my mind up yet. Alright, so here's what we got. There's two studs that you're going to have to take off, one being right there and then one being right below it. And I think in order to get those studs out, I used an 11/16 wrench. So now let's gently pull this cover off. Make sure that I got everything off the bottom. I don't see any bolts that could hold that in. There she goes. Let's see, where's my screwdriver at? And you'll struggle to get it off the oil pan a bit. There we go, there's the timing chain. And now here on this, I'm going to try and clean this up, but I understand that if there's a bunch of pitting and stuff around the water passages, that the front cover's to be replaced. So we'll put a new seal in the front of it, get this thing cleaned up with the wire brush, and see what it looks like in a few minutes. You want to try your best to keep your debris out of your oil pan, but this gasket right here cannot be reused. This is so on this actual vehicle here, the oil pan's going to have to be replaced unless I just want to deal with the leak. Of course I don't. So I'll be doing an oil pan gasket on this thing too, so whatever it takes though. But the seal that runs around this is all rotted out and all, so go ahead and replace that while we're at it. And right here's the lower intake that it's really the root cause of the problem, and eventually I'll get to it too. Okay, in order to get this pan off, first you're gonna need to take out the starter. I've already done that, and there's two 13mm bolts that hold it, and you can just set it up here on the subframe or radiator support, whatever you want to call that. There's a little spacer laying right here that you take out of there. There's an 8mm bolt sticking out over here somewhere, and you just take that out and slide that out. You go around the oil pan, take out all the 8mm bolts. I left this one right here in, right below the oil filter, to make it easy to remove the oil pan. Hopefully I can get that down without having to do anything to the exhaust. Go ahead and remove the last remaining bolt in the oil pan. Let me see if I can wiggle this out. I think I'm going to have to do something about dropping the exhaust manifold a little though. Okay, so you cannot get the oil pan down with the exhaust there. So what I'm doing is taking the two 15mm bolts that connects the manifold to the pipe itself. And we already got to go ahead and do the lower intake manifold. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the upper intake manifold off so I can get to the bolts for the back side so I can pull the exhaust down and get the oil pan out. So I went ahead and disconnected everything from the intake manifold, all the hoses and wires and bolts. And all I got left is these 13mm bolts that hold it down to the engine. Okay, and there's a bracket down here that holds that to the motor as well. Let me now the intake be ready to come off, and you want to unhook your throttle and cruise control cables. Connectors and stuff on the back I didn't quite get to. We got the intake manifold off, the upper intake manifold. And then, see, there's one bolt that I got to undo off the exhaust, and trying really hard to see the other one. But right there's where we're going to take off the exhaust. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken the fuel pressure sensor off the end of the fuel rail. I know it's dark. I'll show that later once I've gotten the whole fuel rail itself removed. So I went ahead and I've taken out the, I went ahead and loosened the 8mm bolts that hold on the valve cover. And what I strongly suggest you do is take a picture so that you see the outlay of them. But it's pretty easy here. All of them are the ones that have standoffs for the wiring harness, except for the two up at the top of the oil cap on the right hand side. So we're going to go ahead and pull these bolts. Oh, actually, you know what? They're attached to the valve cover. They're not coming out without some kind of a fight out of the valve cover, so we'll go ahead and pull the valve cover with the bolts on. There we go. That didn't look quite as bad as I thought it might, but definitely see where they put just a little bit of RTV to hold that gasket in place. You want to make sure none of that stuff makes it down into your engine. So next I'm going to take the 8mm bolts holding this fuel rail here out. So what I'm going to have to do to fix this fuel rail is JB weld the fuel pressure sensor back to the fuel rail, because some goon damaged this when they repaired this car when it belonged to my grandmother. Wouldn't you know it, this is an obsolete part. You can't find these. And call a junkyard so I could find a call, and it's not, wasn't able. So now that we got those bolts removed, you just pull this up off the fuel injectors. Twist your injectors a little, and the whole thing will pull out. And also, one thing I didn't mention, make sure and cover up the holes that go into your intake. You do not want to drop anything down in your block. And that would also include on the heads too, where the oil would run back down. You want to make sure and get that plugged so that no debris falls down in there while you're doing all this mess. So what you're going to have to do is this pretty much the same for the back side, except you're going to have to undo this engine wire and harness mess back here to even get started to it. It's hard enough to get a camera angle. I'll try and see what I can come up here with, but it's pretty dark and difficult to even see what in the world I'm up to. Sorry, I have a problem with headaches. A lot of times I'm forced to work at night. Okay, to get the engine wiring harness off, what you're going to need to do is unhook the fuel injectors, of course, from the wiring harness, and then the whole harness itself will just pick up off the standoffs that it's on, and that's not going to really quite be enough. So what you're going to need to do is also unhook the connector that goes to your air conditioner compressor. Okay, now that it's daylight, you can see what I've done a little bit better. You're going to have to watch out for the debris that could possibly enter into the intake from pulling the injectors out. And here with the wiring harness, you'll see that I've already unhooked the connectors for the fuel injectors. And I don't know if you have to fully move this out of the way or not. I'm going to try to leave it there. I'm going to take that back. I'm going to go ahead and undo the connector down there at the bottom. That looks like that's for an O2 sensor. And pull all the wiring harness to the back of the car, back of the engine there. And then I'm going to get the valve cover off. So anyway, again, make sure and plug your holes with some rags or something so that you don't have stuff dropping down into your engine. That can really make your job much more of a headache than it had to be. Okay, so I'll go ahead and remove the other valve cover. Maybe. Go ahead and get the Permatex off that they used to seal the seal down. So you don't want that dropping down in your engine. And then there's 2 more bolts to take the other fuel rail off. And those are 8mm as well. None of these bolts should be terribly hard to get off or anything. Depending on what year of Taurus you have, or rather this 3-liter here in general, will depend on whether you have plastic or metal frame rails, and the designs vary on the plastic ones, what I noticed when I tried to find a replacement for these. And now that I got that free, let the camera focus on that. Oop. Well, that's just gas, it'll evaporate. And you can see that some genius busted that off, and guess what? Ford don't make these parts, and nobody else does either. So we're gonna have to repair that. Next, we got about 8 Torx bolts. I think they're T50s, and right there's one of them, and there's another on the corner, and you can see my socket wrenches in another. They're not torqued down there very hard either. So you just go around there and get those off, and that'll... I'm gonna have to take this off. I think I already did that one out. I've already unhooked all the other sensors and electrical connections that go to the intake manifold. So now what I'm going to do is unhook the hoses that run to it so that I can get the bolts off and it off. Remember, if you have trouble with stuck hoses, just grab it with some vice grips like that right there and twist it around. And it'll just pull off. Run it and unhook the electrical connector. I'm not gonna bother with all that. I'm lazy. I think my hoses on my car have all swelled because of the oil contamination in the water. That's another reason that I'm replacing all the coolant hoses. There's no way I'd trust them after all that. If you wait till last to take that one off, there won't be no water because it'll already be out of the radiator. So now we can get to the, try to get to the last bolt. Just get an extension, get by it. Toughest one on there. Imagine that. And these will probably be the easiest bolts to keep up with out of the whole blame thing. Now, so I got one other hose I didn't notice connected here. Looks like that goes to I don't know. Now I got a heater core hose over here that also needs to be unhooked. Clamps are a pain in the butt when they get older and don't want to come off. Stick your fingers in there, make sure not to ever get it pinched between it and the hose. I assure you that probably won't feel good. Now I got it off there, I'll bother to say I don't think I've ever done that yet. In order to remove this intake manifold, we're going to have to take the push rods out. So let's go up through here and loosen up the bolts on these rockers. And it is a 10mm socket, by the way. And don't just take it completely off unless you have something else to do. Leave the rocker in the same spot. Make sure you mark the push rods with the corresponding spot they came out of. You don't want to stick them in a different way or a different place. It just I appreciate all of you that watch my channel, my videos, and those of you that chat back and forth with me. Thank you. I want to take a moment and praise my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for all the mercy and grace that He's shown me and my family. And if you don't know Him, I pray that you do meet Him. You can read about Him in the King James Bible, and you can check out on my website at sharingthetruthandlove.com and click on the Salvation tab. Have the gospel outlined as to who Jesus Christ is and what He did to save you and how you can be saved. Grace through faith alone and no works of yourselves. So anyway, my friends and viewers, thank you again, and praise our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Have a great rest of your weekend.